Hello and welcome to Army of Crime, your favorite comic book podcast. I am your host, Matt, and I am here with my co-host, Dustin.
Yo, yo, yo.
This episode, we are continuing a tour through scenic and fanciful Europe by looking at the comic Peplum, which is just fun to say. Peplum. By the French comics artist / writer Blutch. I assume his name is pronounced.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce this for us at all?
So, Peplum is, in fact, how does one? Well, it is.
Yes. How does one describe?
It is a unofficial sequel / reimagining of the ancient Roman novel Satyricon, which exists which does not exist in a complete surviving edition, but exists. It survives in pieces, believed to have been written by Gaius Petronius. And Satyricon is about the bizarre exploits of quoting from Wikipedia here, detailed the bizarre exploits of the narrator Encolpius and his slave and boyfriend Giton, a handsome 16-year-old boy. And it's about them going off and having wacky adventures. So Peplum sort of picks up as like I said, it was intended as a kind of like sequel / remake / homage to apparently one of Blutch's favorite novels, Satyricon. So the main character I don't believe is ever named, but it begins with him in a group of men who are like treasure hunters of some sort, who are perhaps slaves. I'm not sure. It's not clear exactly. And then they unearth a beautiful woman frozen in a block of ice, and they dig her out and they start embarking to transport her back to Rome. And then from there, it becomes this bizarre Picard-esque adventure.
I was going to describe it as a phantasmagoric fool's journey.
Yeah.
Taking place during Imperial Rome.
Yes, and it actually begins in something that's like loosely related to the story, is the death of Julius Caesar is kind of like an odd piece of like stage setting. And then it goes through various violent and or sexual adventures of the main character. And we should say that this was in the last couple of years, I think like 5 years ago, was published in English. It's originally a French comic book, and Blutch is apparently a big deal in France, and now in the last couple of years has started to have his work published in English. It is in black and white as well. Matt, what did you think of Peplum? And don't say it was interesting.
Okay, I won't. What I was going to say was, as a person who likes Roman history as a general topic, it does a good job of it, because it's like this fool's journey. He kind of like pokes around in a bunch of different areas.
Yes.
He gets captured by pirates. I mean, he gets actually captured a lot. Captured several times.
Yes.
By pirates, by the Roman military, ends up in several different cities. He gets shipwrecked. The sexual relations between like men is, as far as I know, somewhat fairly accurate to like Roman culture of the time, because one of the plot points is that he meets an attractive young lad that he then journeys with, and then an older man that they get captured by takes a liking to the attractive young lad, which was sort of a custom in the Greco-Roman world.
Right.
That the male to male relationship should have some kind of age difference because there's like a dominant partner who'd generally be an older man, and so that's used as a plot element. Yeah, and he at the beginning it seems like he's like a escaped slave or something perhaps,
Well,
and
apparently
he
there's a line quoted from the Satyricon that is, I have evaded justice, I have escaped the arena, I have slain my host. All this to end up after so many daring feats, nothing but a beggar. That is apparently a line from the Satyricon.
okay.
Though that's
Yeah.
actually not said by the main character. It's said by a Roman, so-called Roman knight whose name is Publius Cimber, who the main character later kills and steals his identity, which is something that the main character actually does several times.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say one of the plot points is that the fact that he keeps trying to impersonate like a high-ranking Roman, like a member of the Roman military, like a Roman knight. That they use the word knight, he's trying to impersonate him, which was kind of a wacky thing you could do back then, of course, because they can't give you, the DNA test. I think it's Russian history where the same guy got impersonated like multiple times, and they would keep having like false versions of him pop up.
Well, I think it goes to show in sort of like this is a very like raucous and rowdy trip through the Roman world, and it kind of shows how strictly stratified it was in terms of class. Because like at one point, the main character and his young male lover, who he refers to as his little brother, which in fact, in another case of impersonation, he apparently killed the kid's brother after robbing him, and then sort of like adopts him as his little brother slash lover. Anyway, they go to a city where everyone's been killed and they're like stacked with corpses. And one of the guys goes to the commander in the city and is like, what should we do with these two people that we caught? And he's like, well, I don't care, just crucify them. And they're like, the one claims to be Publius Cimber. So they're like, oh, wait, let's see him. So it's like he shows you how, strictly divided and on class and things like that and on birth the Roman world was, and how this character is always trying, mostly like unsuccessfully, to like navigate through that with his with some degree of subterfuge.
Trying to like bootstrap himself up the social ladder almost by like brute force, by
Yeah,
sheer persistence. I think it shows something too. There's some commentary on the mutability of identity because
right,
the main character has no fixed identity.
right. He just it keeps like adopting whatever identity is like most useful in whatever situation that he finds himself in.
And the whole plot of carrying around this, he has like this frozen woman that he thinks is still alive.
Yes, a
It
beautiful.
Yeah, it's like this plot device, but he does abandon her at several points and then goes back to her. So it's like a vessel for him to like travel through the Roman world. He meets like a woman without hands. He struggles to, get erect at one point to seduce an actress after killing another actor in like a play.
Yeah, there's a whole part where his impotence becomes kind of his undoing. And yeah, he is in love with this woman who's in a slowly melting block of ice and believes that she is still alive and she's like his beloved.
Yeah, and I think that circles around to the mutability of identity because he's ascribing, of course, he knows nothing. He's ascribing all these qualities to this person he finds frozen in a block of ice that he knows absolutely zilch about. Uh, we don't even know if she's actually alive or not as you're reading it, and of course, the fact that she's perpetually frozen in a block of ice suggests something of the fantasy or
Right.
le supernatural. But the whole thing is just kind of him like pinballing around Imperial Rome. I think he gets. I mean, how many times does he get captured? He gets captured. He gets shipwrecked like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Fights barbarians. Um, a lot of things happen. and I think that like the struggle is the main character uh going through this like perpetual identity crisis, I suppose, and this unresolved question mark of this woman frozen in the ice.
Yeah. So what did you find about the visuals of Peplum? I should say, by the way, also that I really like Peplum. I think it's divided into, I think, 10 chapters, which are all kind of like their own distinct little stories about this protagonist. And it's definitely, like you said, very strange, hallucinatory, wild kind of reading experience. But I find myself to be quite enjoying it. But also, as you said, I'm also a big fan of like Roman history and stuff. So that's probably part of it. And I think the visuals of it are really appealing and part of why I think it works so well. Like Blutch draws in, and I'm not like an expert on European comics, but from what I've read, black and white was not the norm. But he draws in this very kind of like scratchy, like inky kind of style that often has like large swaths of like smudgy, like black ink. Sort of like almost like who's the Mort Cinder guy? Why can I never remember his name?
Alberto Breccia.
Yes. And so these like smudgy, like black inky shadows are almost reminiscent of an Alberto Breccia, but like the actual line work for the figures is of a much more cartoony style that's not aiming for realism. It's more like caricatured style, but there's still there's some like extremely like striking images as you go through this. Like it's interesting
Absolutely.
how
And
he
it
draws.
almost has, I was going to say, it has almost kind of like a sketchbook quality because oftentimes he kind of lets the backgrounds fade out.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
I was gonna say it's interesting too how some characters are drawn. Like the young boy is drawn like in a very like much more like attractive fashion. Like the main character has these white eyes with little like black dots of like pupils, and then the young boy who becomes his lover slash brother has like curly hair and has like these full like almost like Disney character kind of like pupils, which gives them this very like cutesy kind of look. It's like an interesting like in contrast. That's obviously like a very clear visual choice. And then there's a great image too later where there's like a splash page of a city where he's just saying "you're melting" as he's realizing that his lover, this woman trapped in ice, is slowly melting. And do you remember the page? It's page 93, the one I'm talking about, where it's like a very impressionistic cityscape that looks like it's like smudgy, like black ink, and like with white buildings.
Yes, it is. Yeah, there's a lot of good. There's a lot of good cityscapes. There's a good images of like the when there's the army of pirates marching and they have
Yeah,
their they're marching with their shields. There's the rows of like crucifixes or stuff when the Roman army takes the pirate city. Yeah, there's a lot of good vistas like those kind of like epic. I mean, it's named after the Sword and Sandal movies. The title. It's not really like content wise that's not really what it's like, but the name of the comic refers to the epic
yeah,
like Sword and Sandals movies, and you do get some of that imagery, not necessarily as like content, but some of that imagery of like when they're intersecting with like the marching armies, yeah, and
yeah,
those like cityscapes where it's used that black and white, so it's just like little lines that are like suggestive of these. It makes the city almost look like a warren or like a
right.
like a rat's hovel or something like that.
Yeah, I like the part where it starts in chapter 5 where there's a page that has 3 panels and there's a close up of a guy's face who's terrified, and there's the main character's face looking mean, and then the terrified guy, and you can see that he's on top of this guy choking him and robbing him. And then when he takes his money, the guy throws a rock at him, and then they fight, and he throws the guy off a cliff. And he's like, "Brute, what a brute, a real brute." Like he's lamenting how mean this guy was that he just killed and threw off a cliff, and then steals his brother.
Yeah. Or I mean the other I mean the person trapped there might have been the guy's slave or something.
Yeah, it's not really clear what it is.
I wouldn't say it's highly likely that it was really his brother. But yeah, and then you see him standing on this cliffside, and there's like all these like runaway slaves or like vagabonds living in the side of a cliff like birds or something.
Yeah.
And of course that was another part of Roman society, was certainly like slaves could be used for sexual purposes freely, but so I think it's entirely plausible that the striking young lad, that everyone's so attracted to is perhaps just like a slave that was captured,
And is
his
being
owner,
like traded around by adult men.
right?
So Matt, did you like Peplum?
I did like it. It's a quick read, right? About 40 minutes. I did enjoy it. I could have done some more. And I know Blutch has a bunch of stuff, right? Not a lot of which is probably not in English, but I wanted more. And, you turn the page because the nature of the story of it kind of being like a fool's journey, or I believe you described it as Picard-esque.
Yes.
There's not a real strong narrative, so you don't really get a sense of like it's getting close to the end or not, right? You just kind of turn the page and you're like, oh, okay. It does kind of come to something of an end, certainly. But I could have done more. I mean, the art is great. You get all these great black and white figures, the cityscapes. Yeah, and then at the end, it just kind of brings it around, and I could have done more. I wish there was.
Well, that's kind of like the Satyricon, since it's lost, or a large portion of it is lost when you read what exists for the complete elements of it. It apparently just like ends like mid-sentence.
Yeah, and I suppose he's doing that. I mean, it does have an ending. It does have an ending, but given the mutable identity of the main character, I mean, you could have done a lot more with it. I guess is what I'm saying. Not that everything needs to be 600 pages long, but
Right.
I mean, it's a good sign of it that you want more, that you finish it and you're like, huh.
What was your read on the very end, the last page?
The last page. So the end is where he gets shipwrecked for the final and like gazillionth time. How many times does he get shipwrecked? Like 4 times or something?
At least like 4 or 5 times, yeah.
Well, are we giving away the ending?
I guess, but is this really a story where you can like spoil it?
I mean, the ending is, spoiler alert for what that counts for, or whatever. The ending is that the ice person finally melts, and she was like dead the whole time. It was just like a body,
Yeah. Well,
a body with the appearance of life. He was reading more into it than was really there. He was reading life into a lifeless figure. So there's something in there, I think, about like perception. We're all just dust blown on the wind or something.
What? And these guys in the background are saying she is dead, and then the one says she is dead ? And then he has this like weird smirk on his face where he says she was dead, which I didn't quite know how to read. It's kind of like the main character kind of like smirking, like he knows more than these fools saying that she's dead, like she was dead the whole time.
Oh, right. Like maybe he knew that.
And he's realizing this, or maybe he's saying she was dead, like, everybody's dead. What's the big deal? Like,
right.
Death is the universal constant. I'm not sure. But then there's also this great 1-page epilogue, or I guess it's like a 2-page epilogue, where he's now cavorting with some Roman bigwigs, some like senators or something wearing their togas. It starts with this like black cityscape at night, kind of. That's really foreboding looking. And then one fancy rich Roman guy is like, ever hear about those folks who were so hungry they ate the insides of their cheeks? And then everyone has a big laugh. And then he's like, when Numantia was taken by Scipio, they found mothers with the half-eaten bodies of their babies pressed to their breasts. And then everyone just looks at him as he's like brooding. And that is, of course, something I believe is what the previous action of the pirate city that was taken and everyone was killed, was Numantia being taken by Scipio. So it's like positing some kind of future, or who knows, like, or some kind of future existence where he is showing up these like hoity-toity like bigwigs by telling them about how, you know, they're heroic Roman generals like Scipio are the creators of these like genocides.
Yeah.
As a counterpoint to them, you know, just like laughing about the fate of the downtrodden and starving.
Right, and then suggesting that the main characters uh at very almost like transparently unsuccessful attempts to force himself to become a higher class person somehow worked.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
obviously,
again, which shows you both how, as you mentioned, how stratified Roman society was by class, but also how incredibly meaningless and arbitrary that is.
did you like the part where a gladiator woman is like trying to kill him slash rape him, and then he kills her, and then there's like a whole crowd of people who come out cheering?
That was odd. Yeah, there's some odd parts. There's a part where he meets like a whole cave full of women without hands or something.
Yeah,
There's some odd parts.
where he's in a boat with like some starving people who have had their eyes put out, and a guy says, "Know that death comes swiftly for you. Remember, a part of your head is dead already." Not sure exactly what that means. What part of your head is dead already?
I mean, if they're blind, their eyes are already dead. I'm not.
Oh, I guess that's what he was implying.
Yeah, but they must assume that he's also blind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating little read.
Well, Matt, any further thoughts on Peplum? Or does it make you want to read more comic books by Blutch,
It
or
does.
what do you
It
think?
actually does, and it also reminds me of the thought that I have that always pops in my head various times throughout, doing things, is that the Roman Empire feels underused as a setting for things to happen in.
Kind of. Like, I feel like there's so much of, you know, when you have like movies and stuff that are set in ancient Rome, they're almost always about the famous generals and politicians and stuff. Whereas in this, you get kind of the, people's history of Rome, where it's all like body, working class, sex and violence kind of thing, which I feel like was probably much more, specific to the way that the vast majority of people would have lived at the time.
Yeah. As far as like historical fiction, I mean, in the Western, I feel like in the English speaking world, at least like the Middle Ages is like thing number one. I don't know. I don't feel like there is a lot of stuff that happens in Rome. I feel like it's an underserved time period for historical adventures.
It might be. You might be right. At least in like more things of more like this rather than.
Yeah, and I think you could plausibly call this like a historical fantasy. It's like historical. I mean, the setting is kind of the window dressing. It's kind of like a fantasy, in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I would say the Roman Empire is also an underused setting, and it's interesting how it does manage in its brief pages. I feel like it does capture something of the Roman Empire in this time period, and through a lot of the Roman Empire, um, was a place where whole cities could be like wiped out on a
Yeah.
whim. I mean, it's kind of a violent world, with slavery and um, sexual identities that are commonplace for them, that little thornier for us to unravel. And
Right.
and
The
and I think
sexual mores are completely alien to modern society.
yeah, so I think it does a good job of giving you some flavor of that. So yeah, I would say give it a read, or not. I'm not the boss of you. Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're the kind of person that likes things just because they have cool art, that it's worth for that, certainly, because it does have cool art. If you have interest in like Roman Empire, or a slice of that world, I think you could find an in for that, certainly. Well, Dustin, I guess that's technically the episode of a podcast. Our website is Army of Crime armyofcrime.com on the interwebs. You can find us on, I'm on Twitter at Army of Crime. Dustin is on Twitter as well at Dustin44444. And, you can come yell at us or whatever. If you want to leave a review, 5-star review, feeds the algorithms that determine the course of all of our lives.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Stay alive out there, everyone. Until next time. Thrilling audio content.